Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
All right, awesome, awesome. Could you give me one more second? I'm just gonna make sure my video looks good before we get started. All right. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Awesome, awesome. If for the people that are currently on the line, you can go off of mute just to say hello. And then I'll quickly get into the presentation over the topic of debt. But to start off, I'm introducing myself. I'm Leke Ainusi. I had the pleasure of speaking to you guys previously, I think in August, actually. And I think then we just talked about transitioning through the college phase, transitioning from high school to college, from college to the workforce. And now today we're talking about a very important topic, debt. And some of you might have experience with it, some of you might not. I'm hoping that this would be interactive. If possible, I encourage everyone to turn on their video, get in a comfortable position so that we can chat. You can ask questions. We can get to some answers and get to some thought process. That's pretty much what I hope to communicate to you guys, principles on things that have helped me, things that I'm learning, and kind of where I'm striving to get to. So hope that sounds good. I don't plan on speaking too long, so that we have a lot of time for questions, probably 15, 20 minutes. Um, so if that's okay with everybody, I'll go ahead and share my screen. I put together a little short slide presentation um, over just that. Can you guys see my screen? Thumbs up, yay, nay.
Yeah.
All right, awesome, awesome. All right, so I would really, like I said, guys, I really like to make this interactive because I like to know what people on the call would like to get out of it. I pretty much put together something very simple, and we can chat through it. So nobody is a stranger to the subject of debt. Um, every now and then you hear people ask of, is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? And I'm not in favor of asking if debt is a good or a bad thing because it's not a meaningful question. The question doesn't help you um, if you are one in debt or considering, you know, going in debt. So if anyone on the call, does anyone on the call have a definition for debt? Just
Money that is being owned to like an organization or a person.
that is being owned. Is that what you said?
No, that is being owed.
Owed. Okay. Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. Anybody else? All right. Yeah. Quite frankly, it's just owing. We know this. The way I put it is you're simply not paying in full for a product or a service. Um, whether you want that car, whether you want the house, whether you want to get an education, whether you want the latest PlayStation 5, or the newest shoes, if you are paying for it for anything other than full price and you're not bargaining, right? Um, then you are essentially getting in debt. Like I mentioned earlier, we're not going to classify it as a good or bad thing. We're just going to go through in principle what makes sense, how you should think about it, and how you should probably think deeper before you decide to, you know, owe somebody or owe a company or owe a person or owe a corporation um, your money. And I have this quote down here. Oh, let me go back. And I have this quote down here that I think is important. Give me one second. I am trying to minimize the camera. of Zoom here. Okay. So I said most people, there we go. So most people don't have a debt problem. They have a poor relationship with managing money along with an income problem. So when you think about that, why do I say that? One, a lot of individuals, myself included at some point, we borrow money to get something or get a service. And the challenge is if you are having to borrow money, it's either one, you don't have the money, or two, you're not willing to put up the money in order to get that product or service, right? So both scenarios are slightly different. However, if you don't have the money, then it's not just you being in a debt problem, then you kind of really at a deeper level have an income challenge, right? You don't have enough income to cover the item that you want to get or obtain or the service you want to utilize, as well as some individuals have a poor relationship with money in terms of they can't manage their resources properly. So it doesn't matter how much money they earn or comes in, they end up spending more money than it comes in. So they're always going to be in debt. So on this slide, here are some kind of common debt. Anyone on the call can chime in on where they fall into this category. So if you have consumer debt, you can give an example of what do you owe? If you have an education debt, you know, what school or what organization do you owe? Is it Sallie Mae? You know, just for example. Anybody? For example, I have a student debt, right? University of Houston still owe them a couple of money or a little bit of money from my degree in engineering. Somebody says they're debt free at the moment. That's awesome. Somebody borrowed money from a friend. We have somebody with a mortgage. So we kind of have it all over the place. I have quote unquote a couple of credit cards debt, and I'll kind of try to go into a little more detail on how I think about it. And there's plethora of resources. Many people have many philosophies about it, but the one thing I always encourage is to find a philosophy and find the principles and then execute on it so that you're not scattered in your approach. So before we go into like a little more detail, we're going to start with a relationship with money, right? Has there been a time when you bought something you don't need with money you don't have? Can anyone give an example of something they have bought with money they don't have? So I'm not sure how many, you know, of the college students on here have credit cards. Anybody with a credit card? 1, 2, 3, 5. So if you have a credit card, it is very easy for you to buy things that you don't necessarily need with credit card money because you don't have the money for it. So one, at that level, you have to be able to identify what is it that I need, right? Do I really need that pair of shoes? Do I really need the PlayStation 5? Especially if you don't have the money to obtain it, right? And then you have to analyze that and be willing to not make those purchases, right, to get those items. Somebody put, very importantly, I have a credit card to build credit for the future. That is very important. So if there's any college student that doesn't have a credit card here, I only encourage you to get a credit card if you're going to develop the financial discipline, which is the next part, right? A credit card in the United States of America is a pivotal tool towards leveraging debt to get an access to bigger amount of money to get other resources like a home. For example, we talked about a mortgage, right? If you're not familiar, if you live in your parents' house, your parents have a mortgage, right? Most mortgages are in a 30-year time frame. So based on your parents or your credit score, which is the metric for credit, they will be allocated a certain amount of money for a certain amount of interest rate. And the better the credit score, ideally, the lower the interest rate. So by having good credit scores, you essentially tells the loan agencies, the banks, that you are a reliable individual for us to do business with and us to give you money, and we can have a better chance of getting our money back. And from the business perspective, they want you to pay interest because that's how they make money. They don't necessarily make money if you leverage money from them and you don't pay interest. So that's where the financial discipline comes in, right? If you have a credit card, if you have a check-ins account, it is very important, right, to spend no more than money than is coming in. And we'll get into a little bit of caveats where being creative is important, right? The other bullet point that I have here is be willing to work for it, right? Laziness is not an option. If you really want that pair of shoes, be willing to work for it. Now, that might mean you actually get a job and you work extra hours. That might mean you become creative. You might make a painting and sell the painting and make enough money to purchase the item. That might mean using a little bit of creativity. For example, if you wanted that PlayStation 5 right now, right? It's a hot commodity item, right? Being creative, thinking a little bit entrepreneurial, you could have bought multiple PlayStations, sold 2 of them for a profit, and essentially those 2 items would pay off what you wanted. So becoming creative, thinking outside the box is very important towards not being in debt or getting those things that you want, getting those resources that you need in order to just do whatever it is that you want to accomplish. The 2 important things that I have are related to perspective, right? Money is a tool and money is a seed, right? A lot of the times from my background, I was told save, 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 right? But that's not, it's a half truth, right? You shouldn't only save, you should learn to grow because money is a seed. You should learn to grow your money. Now, there's 2 sides to the same coin whereby money, you need to save the seed, and then 2, you need to plant the seed and grow the seed. Anybody who's done any gardening or any farming to whatever extent will understand that not every seed grows, right? So you have to plant wisely and you have to plant a lot. And then all seeds don't exactly yield the same fruit. Some bring a massive amount of fruit depending on the work that was done. So planting isn't as simple as just putting your money someplace. It's being intentional in how you grow your money. And money is a tool, right? A lot of people just want more money, but the question is, what do you want your money to do for you? Do you want your money to help people in charity? Do you want your money to provide the comforts of life? Do you want your money to be used to give you an education? Do you want your money to provide an experience for you in terms of traveling out of country, in terms of seeing places you otherwise would have not seen if you didn't have the resources for it? So those are some important highlights of my relationship with money, right? I see it as a tool, right, to be used, not necessarily to control me, right? Money shouldn't control me. I see it as a seed, right? Being a good steward of money to grow my resources, to have more resources. Then I'm willing to work for it. And then I have the financial discipline to mitigate my debt and to get out of debt as soon as possible. And also, I make sure that with my purchases, I do my best to not buy things I don't need with money I don't have. So does that make sense? Any questions there? All right. And if you have a question, you can ping it in the chat. I can see the chat right now, or you can go off of mute. So that covers relationship with money. All right. So we're going to go into an example here with principles, and we have the parable of the talent. I know a lot of you guys are familiar with the parable of the talent. So if you are familiar with this parable, can you give a thumbs up? All right. So pretty simple. I'm not going to go too in depth into the parable. Basically, a master gave 3 individuals 3 different talents. One got 5, one got 2, and one got 1. Now, here's the challenge. The challenge isn't how much you have. The challenge is what you do with how much you have, right? So for example, the first person that got 5 talents, and this is what was in the passage, the person went at once and traded with them. So they went with 5 talents, which is a resource, and they immediately put into action by trading in order to leverage their 5 talents to double what they previously have and now have 10. That is important. You have to be willing to take action. You cannot sit on what you have. Now we're going to jump to the person that got the first talent, only 1 talent. This person hid their talent. The action they took was to hide their talent, and therefore they ended up with 0 talent. So they hid the one they had, they uncovered it when the master came back, and the master took away that one that they had and gave it to the most successful, to the person that doubled 5. So therefore, now he not only did he have 10 talents, he now has 11, because in principle, he was able to command and to control his resources, so much so that he was quote unquote lucky, right? A lot of people talk about luck, but it's not really luck if you're executing in principle. If you're doing what you're doing well and you're a good steward, you start to get abundance. For example, him getting the excess talent. Now, the second individual also had 2 talents and also took action, right? The person took action. It didn't specify what exactly they did, but they went out and then they brought back 4 talents from the 2 talents that they had. So that's really important. You know, the takeaway from this parable, for me, one of them is you have to be action oriented. You can't just talk about it. You can't just dream about it. You have to be willing to do some sort of action to get a result. Now, will you succeed the very first time? No, you might not, right? You very well might have gotten the first talent, right? Just 1 talent, gone out, tried something with it, and lost that talent. And I'm pretty sure the master will not be disappointed. The master wouldn't be disappointed that, oh, this person put in effort and they lost the resources. Sometimes you lose, right? When you are in terms of dealing with your effort. Sometimes your actions don't exactly bring the result that you want. And it's just part of life and it's part of the game, but it doesn't mean you stop. It means you learn from it and you adjust and you adapt. So the next important point is don't make excuses. Excuses, instead of being action oriented, will set you back more in life than anything, right? So there's what the passage says. He says, he also who had received 1 talent came forward saying, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow and gathering where you scattered no seed. That is a big excuse. He said all of that before he said that I hid the talent, right? Now, the next part is do not let fear control you. The individual with 1 talent let fear control him so much so that he hid his talent. He hid this talent in the ground, and he, in effort, was not able to grow it and was stagnant. And he eventually lost the thing he thought he was protecting the most. Does anybody have questions on that?
But what if you know your talent won't necessarily benefit like the type of path you're trying to go through?
That is a good question. So the way I would first of all define talent is talent means not in in the terms of using like you're talented or America's Got Talent. It just means resources. Now, how you define resources is dependent on you. For example, a talent could be financial. It could be money that you have. A talent could be your level of intelligence. A talent could be your skill set, right? Are you crafty? Are you artistic, right? Are you very skilled in arts and craft? For example, painting. You paint good photos, and your friends and people around you are identifying that, wow, you're talented in this area. So the question is, what if your talent isn't going to work in the path that you're going? Then you have to make a decision whether that path makes sense for you to go to. Because if you're not able to use that talent, then maybe you might need to develop another skill that you can use in that area and grow it that will be applicable to that path. Or maybe the path you're going through is to develop a new set of talents, a new set of resources. So your previous skills might not be applicable in that lane, but in the long term, when you do other things, now you have more talents. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Anybody else have a question on that? That was a good question, by the way. I didn't see who identified that question.
It was Deborah.
Great question, Deborah. Next topic has to do with paying off debt. So, for example, a lot of us are college students here, and if you are in debt, if you have a student loan, if you have credit card debt, if you have a mortgage, if you have whatever your debt is, and the most important thing is to have a plan on how you're going to get out, right? Biblically, we are supposed to be lenders, right? We're not supposed to stay in debt. Debt is not a place for you to stay in, right? Then you can think of, like I said earlier, you can think of debt as a tool, right? And what you do with tools is you leverage to create something, right? You shouldn't live your life continuously in debt. You should leverage it and get out of it so that you live in abundance, right? For example, one of the great scriptures on this is be fruitful, right? So you have to start at being fruitful with what you have, right? Multiply. And then it says have dominion. So when you're starting out, right, you might be leveraging debt initially, and then all of a sudden you're fruitful, right? You're no longer in debt, right? You have more resources than you are demanding. And then you're multiplying means your money is working for you. Your resources are working for you. Your resources are impacting other people's lives in a greater way. Having dominion means you've mastered leveraging your resources, right? Money is no longer an issue for you, right? Relationships are no longer an issue for you. So we might be talking financially. However, I want you to understand that it's not just financial resources that you can leverage. So the first thing I had to do was understand my debt. So for example, my debt being student loans was I had to go on the website, look on there and figure out what my interest rates were, right? Which debt had the highest interest rate? Does it make sense to pay off that debt really fast? And then you have to put a timeline. What's your goal? Do you want to pay that debt off in a year, in 2 years, in 3 years, in 4 years, in 5 years, right? By having that helps you understand the amount of money you need to be paying monthly towards eliminating that debt. You might have a 5-year goal of getting rid of your debt, but doesn't mean you need to wait for 5 years to completely get rid of it, right? Initially, my plan was to get rid of my debt in 5 years. However, I've paid off more than half of it now. I do have the money to pay it off. However, I've been leveraging my debt, and I'm at the point whereby I'm like, okay, I want to get rid of this faster than waiting a couple more years. So therefore, I need to create a plan on how to do that and get creative on how to get out of that debt. The next thing you have to do once you have a date, once you have I want to pay $20,000 in 5 years, you need to have a budget. A budget means you have income. So if you're not working or you don't have some source of income coming in, you can't pay your debt except somebody gives you money or gifts you money. Now, here's where I encourage all the college students. If your parents, family members are helping you out with school, there's a level of responsibility you need to take by not solely depending on them to do everything for you. What do I mean by that? Scholarships. You need to be diligent with looking for scholarships. If you need to work in the summer, start working in the summer, gain that experience. It's good for you. Understand how the workplace is, work those odd jobs because they will be good experiences for you to learn how to deal with people, communicate, right? Be in tough situations, right? Be creative, right? You don't necessarily have to work a job to get income. If you're creative, if you think of creative ways to earn money, right? You might have a skill. You might be, like I said, you might be a good painter and you paint all the time, but now you might be able to leverage your a little bit entrepreneurial spirit and sell your paintings to make a little bit of money towards paying your debt. So take responsibility of your own education, of your own thing, even if somebody else is assisting you in paying for it, right? That might mean just from an academic standpoint, doing as well as you can so that you can command more income in the job market, or doing as well as you can so that you can command more scholarships to help out with that. So zero-based budgeting, exactly in the name, it means don't spend more than you make. That simple, right? And every amount of dollars you make should be accounted for. In the next slide, we're going to go through an example of a budget. And I want you guys to walk through that to see potentially for somebody who graduates college and who starts a professional income, what a budget could look like. Two is, if you don't know how to budget, start simple, right? Look at your credit card expense. If you don't have a credit card, look at your debit card expense. If you don't have a debit card, start tracking the money you spend, right? If you're spending cash, jot it down. Over a month, over 3-month period, know where your money is going and adjust and make a budget to adjust for it. The third one is very important. Test your budget. Because you created a budget doesn't mean it's going to work perfectly. So you need to test it out. You need to try it out. You need to see, where am I spending more money? Where do I need to cut back? What's unnecessary? What don't I really need? And you need to adjust to match that budget, or you need to change your budget or grow your income, or all of the above. Most of the time it's all of the above. The next step for me that's really important is automating your debt. For example, there are a few individuals here that have a mortgage, right? Automating their mortgage will save you a lot of mental headache, right? If you have a student loan and you're already, if you have student loans and you're gonna be in the corporate environment, by automating your student loans to pay every month without you thinking about it, you are saving yourself mental space. So you don't have to always worry about the stress of paying off your debt. So if you're going to automate paying off debt, you need to also automate your savings. That's very important, because once you automate these two things, you remove the headache of having to do it yourself. And a lot of people, if we had to manually do that every month, we're not as diligent with it as a computer is. Out of sight, out of mind, right? And two is, make it inconvenient to spend unnecessary money. Now, that's where you have to get creative. For example, some people will limit the amount of credit cards they have so that they don't just spend money unnecessarily. Some people will only spend cash for a certain period of time so that they don't spend unnecessarily. Some people have multiple accounts. They have an account for spending, they have a separate account for savings, they have an account for student loans. So they separate all their money in order not to spend irresponsibly. Does that make sense? So we're gonna get into this part, and I'd like for this to be interactive. The budget part, right? So can anybody? This is an example budget of a professional income. So my seniors here, you're graduating from college, you are going to the workforce, you get a job offer, they tell you your salary is $6,000 a month. How much are you making in a year? Anybody?
It's not before tax or after tax. Just asking.
Before tax.
72,000.
Yep. So sounds like you're making hot shot money, $72,000, right? So Ms. Peace just asked a very great question: before tax or after tax? So you're making $72,000 a year before tax, right? Now we're gonna go into your first item, how to budget, right? Your first item on budgeting is taxes, right? The government automatically takes taxes from your account, from your employer, if you are an employee. If you're a sole proprietor, you have to pay taxes by yourself. If you're a business owner, you have to pay your taxes by yourself. The government doesn't take it out for you, but if you don't pay, they will come after you. And dealing with the IRS is not funny. Like, you can go to jail for that. That's tax fraud. So most of us being employees, we get our taxes taken out. If you live in Texas, which most of you do, you only pay federal tax. In this example, this individual is paying 25% tax, federal tax. Now, the amount of percentage you pay in tax, if you don't already know this, is based on your income bracket. The more money you make, the more taxes you make, especially, and even especially, if you're an employee. So everything has its perks. If you're an employee, you pay more taxes. If you're a sole proprietor, you pay even higher taxes. If you're a business owner, you tend to pay less taxes. And we're not going to get into the details of why, but that's just how the system is. That's just how the game is. So if you lived in a state like I do in Missouri, I pay state taxes. So you would also account for state taxes. Some states have city tax, and it just goes on and on and on, right? When you purchase, you have sales tax, all of those things. But for this example, this person is only paying federal tax $1,500 a month. So from $6,000, they're down to about $4,500 without even doing anything else, right? If you tithe 10%, right? A lot of people get into the argument of pre-tax, before tax. That's up to personal preference. They're both tax deductible expenses. That's $600 a month, right? If you are living alone, which usually is the biggest expense for most individuals once they graduate from college and have their professional job, is apartments. Biggest expense you have on a monthly basis. And most apartments these days, in most reasonable cities, will cost you somewhere about $1,000, right? Now, you've done that, you have a place to live, you're taking care of your future, which is your 401k. If you're not familiar with that, it's a retirement fund, or it is intended to be a retirement fund where you allocate money into an investment portfolio that you eventually can cash out of either earlier with some penalties or at a certain age of mostly 65, right? So you're taking care of that. You're being responsible, fiscally responsible for your future. The next important principle is, after taxes and after tithing for God, is you need to pay yourself first. The most challenging, but you should have some sort of savings. I encourage you to do 10% or more if possible. If you can't, I understand, but make sure you're at least saving a portion of your income explicitly as savings. And I also encourage you, like one of the things I do is I automate it, right? I never do it manually. It goes directly from my employer into a separate account that is specifically for savings. I don't look at it, I automate it. The next thing that you're never gonna run away from till death outside of taxes is bills, right? Most people are gonna have light, Wi-Fi, water insurance, car insurance, apartment, depending on what your setup is. $300. Food, some people eat out a lot, some people cook by themselves, that varies. Health insurance, very important. right? A lot of the things your parents are probably paying for that you're not thinking about, health insurance you're going to have to pay for. If you went to college and you have student loans or you have credit card loans, you're going to be allocating that in your budget. Also miscellaneous, right? Your Netflix, your shopping, your eating out, your other things, right? Whatever, if you are, if you're starting a business, right? Your miscellaneous could be used for your business expenses. All those things now fall under your budget. And based on who you are, your budget is going to look slightly different. But for the most part, most people are going to have these things that I have on there depending on their belief system and what they value or prioritize. Does anybody see anything wrong with this budget? I purposely put an error in here. So long story short, the error here is this budget is actually overbalanced. If you add up the total amount of all these expenses here, they don't add up to $6,000. So 1,500 plus 1,000 is 2,500. 600 plus 400 is 1,000, so that's 3,500. 3,500 plus 900 is 4,400. Plus 3, 47. Plus 2, 49. Plus 11 is 51. Or should I say 61? So this person is actually over budgeted by $100. So that's how you have to be careful when you're doing your budget. Just make sure it adds up to the total amount of income. That's what I want to highlight with that. The other part to debt is income. Like I mentioned, it's a two-sided coin, right? Most people don't have a debt problem; they have an income problem, and a lot of us are solving our income problem by increasing our value to the marketplace, i.e. getting an education. You're going to school because that is the conventional way of getting an education, right? Do you necessarily need to go to school to get an education? No. What it simply means is you're doing valuable things to learn valuable skills. Now, post-COVID, here are some skills that are highlighted as very valuable. Leadership skills will always be valuable. Why? As long as there are humans on this world, you're going to need leadership skills. You're going to have to learn to work with people. Communication skills, talking right now, giving a presentation. You might have to do this in front of a pair of audience of business people, in front of your manager, in front of hundreds of people. Those are important communication skills, right? And one that I think is the most important is the skill of learning. Because you might not know how to do X right now, but if you are a good learner and you can systematically break things down, then you know you can learn. And that's a valuable asset. So now you can go to an employer and say, hey, I can learn to do X, Y, and Z. Could you help me out with this resources? And then now you've increased your value to the marketplace. So it's not just about worrying about debt. You also have to increase your income capability by becoming more valuable. Questions and answers. So here's a part, feel free to throw in more questions. These are some that I got over text earlier that were asked to me. So what would I have done differently? For me, I would have automated my savings a lot earlier, and I would have made sure to try to kick out a lot more of my debt to reduce the interest rates a lot earlier. Those are two things I would have done a lot earlier. What did COVID teach us about debt and finances? One, it exposed the reality that a lot of individuals don't have an emergency fund, right? And I always encourage, it's simple financial discipline. You want to have at least $1,000 in your bank account for an emergency. Why? If you have a car and your car breaks down, I promise you it's probably going to cost at least $500. So you always want to have at least $1,000 for emergencies. You have a flat tire, you have to buy a new tire. That's $200 right there, plus the person who fixes it for you. So having at least $1,000 of an emergency fund is important. So not just an emergency fund, you also want to have 3 to 6 months of your cost of living. So remember our budget. If our budget was for $6,000 a month, you want to make sure you have about 3 months saved up in case something like COVID happened. But guess what? COVID has been on for 9 months. A lot of people have not had that source of income for 9 months. So which is the next important thing is developing and having multiple streams of income. So I had a question here. Based on my experience with education debt, what steps do I recommend for high school students and parents before they start taking student loans? All right, so this is really important. One is you have to understand your options. So if you're a high school student or you're a parent of a high school student, first of all, you have to talk reality. Do you have the money to go to whatever school you want to go to, right? For example, if you're going to U of H, that's $10,000 every semester if you live on campus. Do you have that? No. Okay, then you might have to consider it. Maybe you might not live on campus. So are you willing to do that? Okay, if you're not willing to do that, how are you going to get the extra $5,000? Are you going to work? Are you going to get scholarships? Are you going to do X, Y, and Z? Or are you going to leverage debt? Leveraging debt should be your last option if you want to stay out of it. So the other thing is, if you want to go to a school, maybe in state or out of state, and you don't necessarily have the financial resources, can you go to HCC? Can you go to a community college that is cheaper and you can take the exact same entry-level courses and get your credits transferred with less than 80% of the cost? A lot of people don't like this option, but here's what's important about this option. When you graduate, your degree does not say your community college. Your degree just only says the university from which you graduated for. You could have transferred universities 5 times. As long as your credits transfer and your GPA transfers, if you have a good GPA, then wherever the last place you graduate from is the last place that's going to be reflected on your graduation certificate. So that's another option to consider. Well, if you go to a local community college, you can go to school and work while you are saving up money and building up that cash that you need for your school. You can go to school and work. So I think that's very important. And then you can take that time to figure out what career path that it is that you want to go to or you want to invest in and study. The other part that is highly underutilized is mentors, right? A lot of people, you already know, you have friends who graduate college. Ask them questions. Hey, how did you get through that class? How did you pay for school, right? And if they've not done what you're trying to do, try to find somebody who's done it, right? Or at least who's on a track that's way better than you in accomplishing what it is you want to accomplish. So those were some of the earlier questions. Other questions? So I think learning about finances should probably be done when the kid can speak, because it's just as simple about math and science, right? It's part of life. Like the kids start speaking the language, they need to learn about resources so that they have a more realistic understanding of the world they're living in. Because you can make it again for young people, and if you have not learned about it, then it's something for you to learn. So somebody asked, what about options of stocks? That's a great question. So here's the thing. If you are not educated on stocks, I don't consider myself a stock expert. That's not my lane. I have enough knowledge to know what it's about. If you are not an expert, find an expert or become the expert. How do you become the expert? Rigorous studying. This has nothing to do with school. They're great books. Find the top 3 or 4 best books on stocks. Learn what it is, right? You don't necessarily have to put money down, but you can pretend to put money in stocks and see how good you're learning for maybe the first 6 months or a year before you might have any money to invest in stocks, if that's a route you want to go to. The other hand, you can find a financial advisor whose full-time job it is to spend looking at all the gory details and stats on stocks. So that's what I usually encourage people to go the route to go. It's like find somebody who's really good at it, whose job it is to do that, and then just like give them the resources to manage it. And obviously you have to make sure it's a trustworthy person, that they're good at their role, and that, you know, they're not going to be fraudulent. Any more questions? Put some resources here. Just stop sharing. Anyone out there? Any more questions? Do you wanna clarify what you mean by investing? Feel free to unmute yourself and ask so that I know what you mean. So here's the thing. With a lot of people, when you say investing, there's multiple investments you can do, right? One, you can invest in a business. 2, you can invest in stocks, which is what this person is asking. How would you start investing in stocks? I'm not a stock expert, but first of all, usually you have to have money to invest in stocks, right? So most people don't have money to burn in investing in stocks if you don't have the expertise or the knowledge. So what could you do? The first thing to start is, like I said earlier, I would encourage you to get the top 3 books on investing in whatever investing lane you want to get into. Read those books. In the case of stocks, once you've read the top 3 books, utilize those books and pretend to create a stock portfolio. What does that mean? You can go on a website like Yahoo Finance and find and track the stocks that you would pretend to invest in, and keep track of them in maybe an Excel sheet, or maybe however you want to keep track of them. Keep track of them for about 3 to 6 months and see how those stocks do. Now, based on how you picked and what you're learning from the books, you could see if you would have made a profit or if you would have made a loss. The other thing you probably should be doing then is to be earning money, right? You need money to invest. So you have to be gaining some source of income, whether it's a job or something. You just have to be putting money together so that once you see that you're actually learning to be a smart investor, then you can start putting a little bit of money and start experimenting with a little bit of money to develop your investing skills if that's what you want to do. Now, like I said earlier, you don't have to learn to invest in stocks. You can go to a financial advisor, and then you just have to find a credible financial advisor and give them your money to invest it for you based on your goals. So I don't know if that makes sense. So somebody says, what type of businesses can students do to grow income? That is a great question, right? So I don't know what your hobbies are, but you have to be you have to be creative and savvy. So what did I do? Right? One, internships. Internships are absolutely important, right? Whether you're a freshman, whether you're a sophomore, whether you're a senior, that's your number one route towards gaining income, that also benefits your education. Why? If you're a freshman and you're able to find an internship, it not only builds up your skills and your portfolio, they also pay you for getting an internship. And two, you actually learn if the industry you're in is an industry you want to work in. So, for example, if somebody's in pharmacy, right, you're going to school, undergrad, biology, and you want to be a pharmacist. And let's say you go work at CVS for a summer and you intern there. If you hate it, then that might be like a good metric of like, maybe this is not the route for me. You might be a sophomore who's an engineering student and you go engineer, you go do an internship at Tesla and you are like, oh my goodness, this is awesome. I would like to work in this environment. Then not only have you gotten learning experience in the workforce, you've also earned some sort of income. And now you have a better understanding of the work, what you're studying, how that relates to real life, if it relates to real life. The other thing is research, right? It doesn't have to be an internship, research projects. A lot of that happens at universities. The other one, to pertain to that question, what businesses can you do? Something I did was sell sneakers in college, right? I'm not a sneakerhead, but I noticed that the sneaker culture, a lot of individuals were willing to pay almost double the price for a pair of sneakers. But guess what? I didn't have the money to buy a $300 pair of sneakers. So I leveraged my credit card. So this is what I was talking about earlier about leverage debt being a tool. So I knew I had a credit card, but I didn't use it just, willy-nilly, right? So I understood that, hey, I had a friend who sold sneakers. I would ask him, I would try to find out what the most prominent sneakers to purchase were and to resell for a profit. And then once I had an idea of what sneakers I could buy, I made sure I bought them on my credit card. And then I made sure the website was one whereby I could return the item within 30 days if I couldn't sell it. So that was like a good exercise. So I bought the pair of shoes on my credit card and I had 30 days to pay it off. But I also had 30 days to return the item if I was not able to sell it. So that was one way I made money as a college student. Two, you can tutor. If you're a college student and you are great at calculus, right? You're getting A's in the class. That is a skill you can leverage. You make a flyer, you make a Zoom website or whatever, you send the links to your classmates or whatever. I have an A in calculus. Or if you've already done a class, for example, if you're in Calculus 3 and you can tutor Calculus 1 and Calculus 2 students, and maybe some Calculus 3 students who are struggling, and you can charge $10 an hour, $50 an hour, depending on who's willing to pay. So you have to be willing to experiment with that and see what you do. So those are some ideas. You just have to be creative, right? It's not going to work for, not everybody might be attuned to that, but figure out what you might be good at and what you might be able to learn and leverage that to make a little bit of extra, maybe pocket money as a college student. There are people who have made t-shirts, right? You're on a college campus, you understand your peers and your colleagues, right? And some individuals have made t-shirts and sold that to their peers and colleagues and making profit. And, they did a t-shirt business in college. So you just have to think about what might work, what you're good at, what you're willing to learn, what you have available to you, the resources you have available, and be willing to experiment to see if it's going to work. And then also you have to be willing to put in the effort. So that was a great question. What options do students have for remote internships during COVID? I think I don't have the clear answer to that one, other than you have to be willing to look for them. I know at my company, they had several remote internships. A lot of companies went to remote internships. the beauty of it is COVID isn't going to last forever. So even if it was going to go through summer, just be diligent about going on sites like LinkedIn, Indeed, going on your college's job portal, talking to your college administrators in terms of your career services. Go talk to them, ask them for help, tell them you're trying to look for an internship. Talk to some of your professors. They might have connections with, corporate or other big organizations, or they might have research opportunities because most people are already doing this virtual to begin with. I think that was the last question. Any more questions? Okay, how can a high school, I think we got one last one. How can a high school student, you are in a beautiful place because for you, if you are attempting to go to college, right, your first way to apply it is try to go to college for free, or try to even get people to pay you, not just for free, but you can even get money back from going to college. If you earn a lot of scholarships, you might be able to cash out some of those scholarships as extra pocket money. So that's a place to start. Another thing is you can always experiment with a side hustle, right? Develop your creativity, develop your skill sets, think about how you can add value to the marketplace to develop a side hustle or to develop other skills that you might care about developing, right? For some people, the way to do it is through athletics, right? If you're an athlete and you hope on getting an athletic scholarship, you need to protect your body, right? It's not just all about weights. Protect your body, be smart, learn the skills you need, learn the discipline, and then don't just rely on your athletic prowess alone. Still apply for academic scholarships. Still do good in school, right? If you get a full ride scholarship for your athletic skills, and now you have a bunch of other scholarships from academics, some of that money could be yours, right? Or you could donate it, or whatever option is available to you. So that's how a high school individual can learn. You don't have to wait to get into college to learn what you want to learn about. Right? These days, there's courses online like Udemy. There's a lot of things available for you to take some time, not just Google. You can sign up for an online course, which are relatively cheaper, and you can learn the skills that you can later use either immediately or maybe in 4 or 5 years to help better yourself in the marketplace, in your personal life, or in whatever avenue you choose to.
Okay. Thank you very much. I must apologize because of the rush. I should have made an introduction before you started. Well, you've been here before, but having said that, you made a very good impression. It's the first time. The impression you make at the first time, it goes a long way. I remember the first time you came, I wasn't here, and I was way back in Missouri, and I was listening. And initially, I had to sit down and take notes. I remember one of the books you recommended, Mindset by Carol Dweck. I had to get that book. Initially I got it on my Kindle, and when I was reading, I said, well, one day my cell phone will crash, and I don't want to lose that information, so I had to buy the hard copy. So I've read it, I've underlined it, so to tell you that we've taken you seriously. You're not just, so if I think it's going to be one of the book of the quarter for next year. I want more people to read it. So it's a very good book. So I really appreciate the time you've put in for us today. Once again, I apologize for all the technical difficulties. I've sent a note to the man in charge of our technical department to verify the link we're using for tomorrow, so that we'll get more people to come in. So it's a big thank you to you.
Very much welcome, sir.
Yeah, just a follow-up to one of the questions. There is this company, Sykes Enterprises. They train, and you can work from home. My daughter worked there this summer, and they pay good. They train, and they give you all the equipment. I think they didn't give her the We gave her a screen monitor because we had a laptop, give her the phone and so on, but it was very convenient and working from home. And so I would recommend people should apply and see how they can do that. So once again, let me ask any questions before, but the thing is that we have a way of connecting with you. So if there's any follow-up question that is that we can't handle, we'll pass them over to you. But I'm going to tell you, you've really done a great job, and I'm happy that it's recorded. We can play back and go and memorize what you said. Thank you.
Yeah, and I guess to close out, like I always say, I challenge everybody here, have a bias towards action, right? So I think I chatted for about 30 minutes, answered some questions for about 30 minutes, but really it's not going to benefit you if you don't have a bias towards action. And I'm saying this even to myself, because at the level I am right now as, you know, postgraduate, right? I still have to move up to the next phase of life or whatever I want to accomplish. I have to still take action. So, you know, for some people, it might be high school right now, it might be college, or you might be on the verge of that transition. But just make sure if it's one thing you do, right, maybe you open up a savings account now, right? That's one action you can take towards starting that snowball effect.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. One of the things we're planning to do in the first discussion for next month to start talking about our vision. What is their plan? And it has to be documented, because even the scriptures say write it down. So if a man running with it can see. One thing I've noticed, I have a very, very busy day. The first thing what drops in my spirit to write them down. Could be about 10 items. In most cases, 80 to 90% I make sure they are complete, because the Holy Spirit keeps reminding you, oh, this is the next one to go. This is the next one to go. So when you have your action point documented or put in a calendar, you work towards it. Otherwise, you just be busy doing other people's assignment. So that's a good point. So we'll discuss in the first month.
Last question, sorry. So there's a stigma about the last question says, is it good to take community college courses? There is a stigma about community colleges that I think COVID will now break. A lot of people have gone into financial ruin by thinking they have to get into an Ivy. So the challenge is, if you don't do the work early, if you don't do the work, if you wanted to get into MIT or Stanford, if you don't do the work early, as far back as high school, as far back as your freshman, sophomore year, you make it more difficult to get into those places, because your peers are the ones that set the curve. If all those colleges take 4.0 students, how many 4.0 students do you think are in America? You don't have to be a 4.0 student, but your peers set the curve. So when you go to a community college, it doesn't mean you're getting a lesser education, because your education is not based on school. It's based on what you do. You have to take responsibility for your education. And I say that because right now, a lot of us are not physically out of school. We're online. We're still getting the same information, but if you don't do the homework, if you don't do the courses, if you don't watch the videos, if you don't soak in the lectures and do the practices, then you're denying yourself of your own education. Therefore, it wouldn't matter whether you went to Stanford or a community college, right? The only difference would be when you graduate, you can quote unquote tell people I went to Stanford, but if somebody hired you in a year or two, they're going to be like, oh yeah, that person sucks, you know? So you don't want that to be the case. So you don't want to get into the door because of your college and then get kicked out because of your poor effort.
That's a very good point. Okay, thank you very much once again. And I want Sister Peace, if they can just round up. What I'm thinking, some of them have presentations to do in the church in the morning. So I want them to go to bed early. So if we can round up around 8:30, as we had originally planned, then tomorrow we can stay late and sleep in on Monday mornings. I'm not going to, most of them are not going to work on Monday, but So that's the plan. Sister Pace, do you want to do the part 2 of your presentation?
I think we can actually round up now and kind of pick up tomorrow evening.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah, go. We lost some of them didn't come in, and I find there's a program going on in the church today. But, I think, but what we've learned, thank God, is recorded. We'll go and play it back. But for all the students, all of you that are calling, thank you very much, and the teachers. I see the Mr. Kaited, the Kenneth Phillips, all of you, thank you very much. OS. So please, it's wanted to have information, but go and do something with it. So that's the way. I'm sure Braleko will be very proud to hear that you're out of debt because of this discussion. So we'll feel very upset that I won't listen to this. You're still getting a credit card and you're not making your payments and so on. So by God's grace, we'll continue tomorrow. And please, in the church, and that's a good point. Tomorrow in the church, I'm going to do an award ceremony during the second service. Most of you have done a great job. We are very proud of you all. So we want to just give you a token as Christmas present. So second service. But first service, we are still going to be there the youth week. So if you have any question, let us know. Hopefully before then, we'll verify the link we're using for the afternoon, for the evening program. And we have another guest coming to talk to us again. Before we close out, any other question?
Before we close, I just want to thank you, Brother Leke, and again, we apologize for the technical hiccups, but we made it. And to the students, I just want to say, if none of your parents are here online, share this information with them. And the reason why I'm saying this is because as a parent, I've seen both sides of college experiences. One of my children started from the community college, transferred to a 4-year college. I have one who went straight to a 4-year college. The experience is different. The hype is different, but the cost is there, and that's the fact. So these conversations are real. I think you need to talk to your parents about it, talk to your mentors about it, use the information that you have, go to school as cheap as possible. I normally joke if I can get a discount on any of those schools, I'll ask them, do you take coupons? Because I do a lot of couponing.
It's not too late. You want to postdoc. Okay, thank you very much. Is Sister Kaite there? What of Deaconess Phillips? I don't know whether they're hearing us. Okay, they're not talking. Sister Pace, give us closing prayers then. Or did you start to talk today? Okay, give us closing prayers.
In Jesus' name.
Amen.
Father, we just want to thank you for this wonderful opportunity. We bless your name. We'll give you all the glory. Thank you, Lord God, for reminding us about the talents, the resources, the skills, and all the blessings that you have blessed us with. As your children, we have those blessings. We just have to apply them to our benefit, but to the glory of your holy name. Father, I pray, Lord God, as we continue this program this weekend, you continue to be with us, and everything that we shall learn, Lord God, we'll apply it, and we'll be better for doing that. As we go tonight, oh Lord God, continue to be with us. Thank you, Lord God, for your son whom you have used this evening. Thank you, Lord God, for him sharing with us and for us learning and being willing to apply the knowledge. Father, I ask, oh Lord God, that you keep us as individuals and as families, and that all we do will bring glory to your name and to your kingdom. In Jesus' mighty name, we have prayed.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Have a good night.